here on an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Quiet Riot. And Quiet Riot formed in Los Angeles, California in 1973 and was co-founded by the late great guitar legend Randy Rhoads. And Randy played the Quiet Riot leading up to the time he left the band to join forces with Ozzy Osbourne. And of course he became a guitar legend, seemingly overnight. And Quiet Riot had two early albums, Quiet Riot 1, or just the album, Quiet Riot in 1977, and Quiet Riot 2 in 1978. And if you haven't heard those albums, don't feel bad, because they were only released in Japan. And after Randy left the group to join forces with Ozzy Osbourne, the band reformed. And Quiet Riot, like in the early 80s, you had Kevin DuBrow on vocals, the late great vocalist, the late great drum legend Frankie Banali on drums, Rudy Sarzo on bass, and Carlos Cavazo on guitar. And that incarnation of the group was definitely the most popular, and their 1983 album Metal Health hit the top of the charts, and that's actually one of the first hard rock or metal albums to reach the top of the Billboard charts. I think it knocked the Police album Synchronicity off the #1 spot when that album blew up. Also in 1995, I actually played in a band and we opened for Quiet Riot. And there's the signatures from the group. There's Kevin, there's Frankie, there's Carlos. And I honestly don't remember who the bass player was. It wasn't Rudy Sarzo and it wasn't Chuck Wright. So I have his signature, but I couldn't actually identify the signature compared to members, from Quiet Riot. So I don't know if they just had kind of a fill-in bass player. But anyway, it was really interesting. And I was honored to meet them. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm opening, and playing in a band opening for Randy Rhoads' old band, and I was completely honored. The opening, that's Bang Your Head, Metal Health, the title track for Metal Health, and something like this. This glorious, power chord opening. You've got this A5 power chord, move to a C sus2 to a G5 right there in open position. And I've seen this written with more, kind of barred power chord shapes. But when I hear that song, I hear those ringing open strings in there. So I believe that's the way Carlos played it. And then right there, grab a C power chord, fretted, and you're also going to lift the root note to that open A string. And kind of bend it a little bit the second time. And go back to that A, and then you're going to basically bash into this G power chord to a D. And then repeat the riff. The second time, just kind of smear that G note on the low E into that A power chord and repeat everything. Okay, up next, the same song, but a different section. This is the verse from Bang Your Head, Metal Health. And I've seen it written and performed, a certain way. And I don't really agree with the way I've seen a lot of people play this song, or at least the verse part. And I did notice in Guitar World magazine, they had a transcription, several years ago. And I flipped through it to see. I wanted to see how they wrote it, in Guitar World. And I agree with the way it was notated there. But something like this, it's cleaner. There it's A major, and then the second chord is the one that's kind of in question. I've seen a lot of people just play B over A like that. actually hearing it more like this. That's going to be A sus2 sharp 11 or sharp 4. And we've actually seen that chord before. But if you really listen to it, you tune to the album because it's a little bit out of tune. Tune to the album and really play along and listen and compare this, you know, A sus2 sharp 11 with that B over A. It has a little different ring to it. There's really just one note different. You know, I'm hearing that E, and I think a lot of people hear that F sharp. But I'm hearing it that way. So you're literally playing A major, A sus2 sharp 11, and then this would basically function as an A minor 7, and then back to that A sus2 sharp 11. See what you think. I'm hearing this for sure. Right up next to the song Breathless, which is also from Metal Health. This is pretty cool. Something like this. Interesting, there's all sorts of implied chords happening here too, and we've got this to open with. It's going to feel like a, you know, a D over F sharp and a little piece of F sharp minor, but there's a B root note. We're doing that kind of gallop feel, and with that, it's kind of implying like a B minor 7, loosely. That fill again, and you're ending on A. And that's going to be kind of like an A sus2. I mean, there's a couple different ways you could look at that, a D over A, I guess. But I'm hearing that A root note, and then back to that implied B minor 7. Here, you're basically going to feel, it's going to feel like you're playing a G major 7 right here, but you're playing the low E with that. So that's going to be an E minor 9 right there. You know, really tasty chord, especially, you know, when it's paired with the other progression we had. Got an F sharp 11 right here, and then you repeat it again. Next is Don't Want to Let You Go, which is also from Metal Health, and we've got these clean, almost jazzy sounding chords, which is unusual for Quiet Riot, but something like this. Right there in the beginning, we're basically doing E minor, and then we're just basically grabbing the 7th fret there, like a bar across the 7th fret. And that's going to be an E9 sus4, kind of implied. So a little fragment of E minor, and then E9 sus4. And then right here, this is going to be an E minor flat 6, like that. Which is kind of unusual. You're barring the 5th fret, and also grabbing that B note up there. And your flat 6 of that C right there. So right there you've got E minor, Right there after that E minor flat 6, you're going to do a little piece of D right there, like a D over E, because I still hear that E ringing like that. And the rhythm just changes. It's the same 4 chords the second time, just a little slightly different, rhythm. You're also letting that low E ring in there. The last time end on this chord, and you're also going to play the open A, and that's kind of like an A minor 9. And then you hear these little partial chords kind of playing around with this E minor partial chord. And then you hear a G5 to a D5. It's like that E minor, kind of partial chord and a little piece of D major right there too. And the second time do a little piece of G. And then you've got D sus2 right here. Okay, up next to the song Condition Critical, which is from the album by the same name, and it's pretty cool, something like this. So it starts with this, and we're kind of playing a lot of implied chords here based around A minor. There's a little piece of A minor right here in the beginning. And we're reaching up and grabbing this D note, so that's going to change that to an A sus4 right there temporarily. And then you're going to move back to this, which is going to feel like part of a G, but if we relate that to A, that's basically an A7 sus2 right now. So there's our, our 7, and there's our sus2, that B note, played against A. And right there, reach up and grab this, and that's going to feel like a G5 right there, but we're still playing that open A string. So you could think of that as an A7 sus4, because there's your 7 and there's your sus4, that D note again that we had earlier. And then go back to this shape, that A7 sus2. And then right there you're kind of pounding on this first chord. This little piece of an F5 right there. And he does the single note line, and he's kind of pinch harmonic, doing some pinch harmonics at the end there, little slight squeals. And then start the first part again. The second time, when you get right there, everything's the same until you get to this. So instead of playing this shape, which what I called that an A7 sus4 a minute ago, but instead of doing that, what you're playing a G and a D right there on the D and G strings, right? But the second time through here, he's just playing the open D and the open G, which is the same 2 notes, just a little lower than what we had earlier. So I like that little twist, in the progression. Really cool. And at the end there, just kind of bang on that A7 sus2, and then a C to a D power chord right there. And go right in the verse. Okay, now for some Quiet Riot action when Randy Rhoads was still in the band. This is the song Trouble, which you can find on Quiet Riot 2 from 1978. It's also on the Quiet Riot, the Randy Rhoads Years album, which I think is from the 90s. But the difference between the two, it's interesting. The original version on Quiet Riot 2 is in standard tuning, and we're actually in tune, unlike some of the stuff from Metal Health and Condition Critical. But then on the Quiet Riot, the Randy Rhoads Years, it's actually a half step higher. So I don't know why it moves from E to F, when you have that kind of remastered version, but it does. You can check it out. But there's basically two guitar parts, and I'm going to use the TC Electronic Ditto Looper to kind of recreate this. And there's one guitar that's clean, and they kind of slowly fade it in, like this. So that's the part I'm going to loop, and then on top of that, you hear these power chords, and it's almost like Good Times, Bad Times by Led Zeppelin. You know, something like this. So the first little pass there, we had that little clean part, and that's basically E major. There's also, you know, it's kind of playing with a sus4 there, that A note. Something like that, and you're just kind of picking through it. You know, really interesting. And then you're hearing this kind of giant, you know, E5 power chord right there. You know, combined with that cleaner part. And then eventually C sharp to A. And it's really interesting what happens there, because that is basically implying like a C sharp minor 7. You know, when you go to that C sharp power chord, you're still hearing this behind it. That's basically implying, you know, a C sharp minor 7. And then when it moves to that A power chord, you're basically playing that A power chord against that. And that's kind of like an A major 7 sus2, I guess you could think of it that way. But anyway, you know, really interesting. And I like when chords kind of mix, you know, and match like that, whether it's overdubs or it's two guitarists, you know, playing together or whatever. But I like the way, you know, it influences what's going on, you know, between those two parts, like that. Then that second riff, it's just kind of like an old school, you know, rock riff. Reminds me of like Born to Be Wild or China Grove or something like that, but that E power chord. And you're sliding this B to C sharp, picking up this F sharp power chord, and then going back to E. Like that. Last example is another one from Randy. This is You Drive Me Crazy, which is from Quiet Riot 2, and there's some really cool chords. I kind of saved the best for last here. Really cool chords here, though. Something like this. Something like that. Really cool. And leave it to Randy, of course, to have this just, you know, buffet of all these really cool chords. But there's an E sus2 right here, played in a very unusual way. Like that. And he's kind of picking through, you know, these chords in a very distinct pattern. That's basically the pattern. Alright, so E sus2, and then we're going to change the root note to D sharp right there. So just think of that as E sus2 over D sharp, and play that same picking pattern. Right here, you're going to move back to this. So you're still keeping that 4th fret on the G, but then now the 5th fret on the A and the 5th fret on the B. And that's going to be a D6 sus2. Like that. Then you're going to basically keep everything the same, but you're going to change this D note to a C sharp, like this. So you're going to do a little switcheroo right there. And then that's going to be a C sharp minor 7. Then you're going to move everything back a fret and then flip those two fingers the other way around, like that. So you were doing this. Move down a fret and flip those two, and then that's magically now a C major 9. And then lower the root note there from C to B, and now you're playing a B minor at 11. And then right there you kind of hear it move from a B power chord, but the open A string is open right there, and then you hear that B5 like that. And there's like distortion, you know, on that last chord right there. But something like this, really cool guitar part. Randy always, just loaded with surprises, and that's really early in his career. It's gonna wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Quiet Riot. Definitely a legendary band, very influential. Early on, of course, with Randy Rhoads, and then when Randy left and Carlos, stepped up to bat, and they knocked it out of the park, in the early '80s. And then they've had some member, changes, and there's a new incarnation of Quiet Riot that I'm not honestly that familiar with. I don't even know if it has any original members. Maybe Chuck Wright, on bass, but I'm not really that familiar with the more recent, incarnation of Quiet Riot. But there's just something about their music, it's classic, it's timeless. There's energy, there's this kind of aggressive side. And even though the early days with Randy was kind of more like glam metal, and then the early days with Carlos, like in the 80s, it was definitely more hard rock and metal. And then it kind of changed, a little bit more as they moved away from that, kind of breakout in the early 80s. But great band. And plus I got to open for them back in the day, which was so cool. And yeah, I was on cloud 9. I was like, oh my gosh, Quiet Riot, no way. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content material. Thank you.